3D printing is a technology that's been around for a while. We've all seen its limited use and application in a variety of commercial and residential environments, but it hasn't quite lived up to the hype. And that's why it's very important that you listen to my interview today with Sam Ruben. He is the CSO and co-founder of Mighty Buildings. Mighty Buildings is a construction technology company based in Oakland, California, and it's innovating in the construction industry by creating beautiful, affordable, and sustainable homes using 3D printing, robotics, and automation. And in my conversation with Sam, we discuss not just 3D printing for residential, but also for commercial applications, why 3D printing hasn't quite lived up to the hype yet, what Mighty Buildings is doing to address that in terms of the type of technology that they are developing and using, and how construction industry companies might use 3D printing both now and in the future to impact the productivity, the safety, and the quality of the projects that they build. So enjoy my interview today with Sam. Feel free to share it with anyone else that you think might benefit from it. I think it's important to listen to interviews like this because with 3D printing, again, we're not quite there, but we're getting there. And Sam and his company are on the cutting edge. And it's a good way for you to be thinking through future technologies that will impact your business. So thanks again for listening to Construction Genius. Enjoy my interview with Sam. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Sam, welcome to Construction Genius.
Oh, pleasure to be here.
I've been fascinated for many years by the use in construction of 3D printing, and so much has been talked about. Applications have been tried, but it still hasn't quite delivered on the expectation, perhaps, or the hype. You're an expert in terms of 3D printing and construction. Can you tell me why that hype hasn't quite been lived up to yet?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, with all great ideas, you end up with going through the Gardner hype cycle. So you kind of have that point where you get a lot of hype, but the technology hasn't quite caught up yet. And I think what we're really seeing now is that the technology is starting to catch up, and so we're starting to see it live into the hype more and more. I think up until this point, one of the big reasons has been, well, obviously the conservative nature of the construction industry, which is understandable. I mean, when you've got a regulatory environment that's literally written in blood from things having gone wrong and people having gotten hurt and people dying, it's important that you're doing things safely. And so that risk averseness is understandable. But I think at the same time, the technology just hasn't been there yet. We've seen effort, like some of those nascent efforts over the last 10 plus years, where you had like Winsun doing some things with concrete, and then some of the work coming out of Europe in terms of bridges and stuff. But it's really only been the last couple of years that we're starting to see real deployments in effective ways into the residential and commercial spaces.
So what's changing to make the application broader and the use easier?
Well, one of the things is I believe that the acute nature of the housing crisis and the lack of productivity in the construction industry. I mean, globally, the industry is leaving over $1.5 trillion on the table. Yeah. Because of a lack of efficiency. I think that's gotten to a point where you've got companies looking for new solutions. There's really a huge need, and there's a realization as we've seen disruption across all these different markets that construction is really the last market that hasn't embraced new technology, and that is more or less still using 100 or 200-year-old methods to build. And so there's a huge, so with this whole startup culture, you're starting to see more and more entrepreneurs who are recognizing that and seeing that there's opportunities to bring new technology to play. And we're also starting to finally see regulatory standards start to catch up and start to be developed for 3D printing construction, which is incredible. It's huge for its adoption within the industry.
That's really interesting because you bring up the regulations, obviously, which can be slow to change. But then you also bring up the mindset of construction being conservative in nature in terms of adopting technology because of risk. As someone who is comfortable in the technology sphere, how do you best have those conversations with construction industry folks in order to get them more comfortable working with new technologies?
Yeah, great question. A lot of it is engaging early and being humble. One of the things that we believe in at Mighty Buildings is the idea of disruption, but the idea of disruption through collaboration. Like our goal at Mighty Buildings isn't to replace all the companies that are out there doing amazing work and that have this incredible experience and knowledge. Our goal is to be a tool to help them do more and to just address the fact that across the country, we're looking at something like 400,000 construction jobs that just aren't being filled. So a lot of it is really stepping out there, meeting with the builders, meeting with the building officials, and doing so well before we're in a position to even really start delivering. And so what we did was we started meeting with them, made sure we were addressing their pain points, kind of reflecting back what we are seeing, making sure it matches with what they're actually experiencing as we continue to develop our technology, so that when we did roll it out, we were in a position to begin speaking to that and that we were addressing those pain points.
Okay. And as you began those conversations, particularly with construction companies, what was the biggest surprise to you? What did you learn the most about where they were coming from and their perspective?
Yeah. So one of the big things that we found from talking with particularly some of the bigger builders is, and this isn't necessarily a knock on 3D printed concrete. I think it has a huge role to play, but literally the first question I would get is, are you using concrete? And as soon as we said no, then they're like, okay, cool, let's talk. There's definitely some reticence in particular against concrete within some of the larger builders and their innovation departments, just because of, I think part of that has to do with 3D printed concrete, and well, technically 3D printed mortar, having been the first technology that really entered the space. And so that early technology having issues with things like cold joints where you get layer separation, with the lack of ability to truly automate it due to the need for reinforcement to meet code, and other issues that didn't necessarily solve the pain points that the builders were having.
That's interesting because it's interesting to think about. You have this sort of broad brush or broad umbrella of technology, 3D printing, and then the one application was concrete, which in theory is like woohoo, whoopee.
Right, but it has a lot of potential.
Yeah, but your approach at Mighty Buildings is a little bit different, or a lot of bit different. Tell me a little bit about that approach and how it differs.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've done differently at Mighty Buildings is, and this largely stems from the fact that none of us in the founding team come from construction. So we are able to really approach everything with a beginner's mind and then understand, and then work with experts in the field and legacy players to understand where we had our knowledge gaps and make sure we were filling those. But in doing so, it meant that we were able to approach it with a completely different way of building. And so what we've developed is a proprietary material and printing process that uses light to cure the material, which means that not only can we print the floors and walls, but we can also print the roof and ceiling, as well as open up possibilities of doing freeform and organic design and organic shapes. Additionally, because of our material is very strong, so similar to that a lot of people are familiar with is Corian by DuPont. Which has been used in countertops and cladding since the 1960s. And what we've done is we've developed a same material that's the same class, so still a thermoset composite, but we've created a higher performance version that has a Class A flame spread rating that we're able to convert into a printable gel that we then hit with light as soon as it exits the nozzle. And what this means is that it's strong enough, really pretty much immediately strong enough it can support its own weight, which allows us to do unsupported spans, curves, things like that. But we also get full chemical cohesion between the layers still. So that means even though we can do those unsupported spans, we still end up with a monolithic shell at the end. And so that's one of the pretty unique thing about it. Additionally, even though it's really strong, it's still soft enough that it can be milled using CNC heads that are traditionally used for metal. And so that opens up the ability to leave the raw print, which is really tight and looks really good. And some people are willing to pay a lot of money to have it done in traditional materials. Or we can mill the surface to be a stone-like finish, similar to what you get with Corian, because it is effectively a synthetic stone, though without the health issues associated with silica. Or we also have then the ability to do things like mimic brickwork or siding, or create facade looks that no one's ever seen before. So it really adds a dimension of versatility to it. And additionally, because we are doing it as prefabrication, it means that we can do full volumetric modules, we can do panels, we can do individual components, really have a lot of diversity of design that's possible with the printer itself. And then we can also do post-processing. We're using robotic arms that have been proven out in the aerospace and automotive industries to do things like do a 3D scan to confirm it matches the digital model, switch the attachment to be the CNC head so we can mill that surface to get it to exactly what's needed for the specs for the project. Also have the ability, we're working on a spray attachment to allow us to automate spraying of paint, primer, stucco, and other finishing materials. So again, add to that versatility of design aesthetics. And then lastly, we're working on automating the pouring of the foam insulation into the interior cavities of the components and modules in order to maximize the energy efficiency of those to allow us to go even beyond California's stringent code into things like passive house and zero net energy homes.
So it's interesting because you're talking about, I'm hearing a couple of themes here. One is the one of the quality issues surrounding things like the mortar, but then also the aesthetic issues, which is one of the objections that people raise often to 3D printing in general, because I mean, it's cool that you can 3D print a house, but the mortar houses, they don't look that exciting. And so that's another issue. And another thing that's interesting to me is you're doing offsite printing. Mm-hmm. And one of the pushbacks that we get from the construction industry is, that's great that you're doing this offsite stuff, but every single project is unique. And so how are you then able to customize for my unique project and my unique design?
Yeah, awesome question. And that's one of the really exciting things about what we're doing, is that by bringing 3D printing and robotics into the prefabrication space, we're actually really able to unlock the power of some of the recent advances in things like digital fabrication and like building information modeling, like BIM. And so what that means is, because we're dealing with a digital file, we can incorporate design changes late in the process. And also where we're moving towards right now, since we're still young, we're focused on a few specific designs. But in the future, where we're going is that ability to take any third-party design and automatically convert it into a 3D printable system through custom software that we're developing. Because that's the exciting things with the printer. Unlike traditional prefab, if we're going from one design to the other, we don't have to change our production flow at all. All we're doing is changing the file in the computer. And so it makes it much, much easier to achieve economies of scale, even at the scale of small batch production. And so where we are now with our panel system is that we're able to do custom floor plans and things like that. And in the future, we'll be expanding that capability to really be able to take those third-party designs and create whatever's needed for a specific site and specific project.
And so currently you guys are residential in your focus, is that correct?
Correct. And a lot of that's because as a startup, it's so important that you find a focus and you stick to it. Because if you lose your focus, you get a little too far out there. That said, we have a new fiber reinforced version of our material right now that we're moving into certification and looking to begin delivering next year, which will allow us to move into multi-story, starting initially with like 2 to 3 story townhouses and single family homes. But where I get excited is that ability to move into 3 to 6 story kind of low rise buildings that can either be commercial, mixed use, residential, and begin to meet those needs of the commercial setting. And that said, in the near term, there's no reason what we're doing couldn't also be applied for commercial buildings as well. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about, is the fact that even though we're focused on the residential market currently, the opportunity for deploying the technology in the future easily expands into commercial and infrastructure.
So in your mind, as you look out at the field of 3D technology and 3D printing, how deep into the construction project will 3D be able to go? What I mean by that is, you understand what I mean by that, I think.
I think so, yeah. So from where I'm sitting, I think it depends on the technology. Because we are beginning to see a variety of 3D printing technologies that are coming into the space. Our goal with what we're doing is that it'll really, frankly, be all of it. Really, I mean, because what we're looking at with our panels is the ability to be everything from the interior finish to the exterior finish, including your air, water, fire, vapor, thermal barriers, all of that. Be able to do the 3D printed floors, ceilings, and really unlock that opportunity, the ability to have 3D printing, eliminate the need for a lot of those additional finishing materials that can add additional costs and additional site work, time on site, and really speed that return on the investment. So I think there's opportunities for it to really become a huge part of it, all the way through from the bones of the building all the way to the finishing of the building. But I think it depends on the technology. There's also some great work happening down in Tennessee, like Branch Technologies, I believe deployed one of the world's first 3D printed facades for I think it was the Tennessee Credit Union, or it was a bank down in Chattanooga, I think. And so they did a really cool 3D printed facade piece using their CFAB technology and then you've got also obviously some of these companies doing concrete, which can then be finished, and like you're starting to see it used for garages and things in Florida and other places and warehouses. But I think there's an opportunity for it but it all depends on which technology you're actually talking about. I think concrete likely will be bones. Technology like ours can be a little more versatile, and technology like what Branch is doing has an opportunity to kind of be more of that exterior finishing, though it could also be interior as well in the future, I believe.
So in your mind, what are the limits of 3D technology in terms of, which trades will not be as impacted by 3D as perhaps others? Yeah,
so one of the areas I see 3D printing really benefiting is by making things like framing safer. I mean, right. Framing of houses is like the second most dangerous job in America. Something like 3,000 or 4,000 injuries and deaths a year. So it makes sense to take those difficult, dangerous parts of the build and give them to 3D printers and robots. And that said, at this point, we can't print wiring, we can't print plumbing. So I think there's definitely still a need for your plumbers, your electricians. And I think there's also, even though the carpenters union, carpenters are going to be impacted by that move away from the framing, I think there's still a lot of opportunities for them as well, particularly given what we've seen from the carpenters working with companies like Factory OS and others in the prefabs, in more traditional prefab, because even though you've got 3D printing, there's still that finishing work that's going to be required and that detail work that still needs a human hand, which is part of why our goal is only to automate 80% of the production process. And in doing so, reduce labor hours per unit as much as 90%, but actually at the end of the day, create more work overall by increasing that productivity by more than 20 times.
So that's interesting because you're disrupting not only the way a building, the materials of a building and, whether the building gets done offsite or on-site, but you're also disrupting the labor market through this technology. How do you guys negotiate that? I mean, you've got your government agencies, you've got to then convince the industry itself, and then you've got to deal with the labor component. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so the problem that we're trying to solve most immediately is the fact that we don't have enough people to build all the housing we need.
Yep.
Full stop. Like we don't, like in 2008, a lot of people left. Those that stayed are getting to the point where a lot of them are starting to retire and leave the industry. My understanding is something like for every 5, here in California at least, like for every 5 skilled GCs that are leaving the industry, 1 lower skilled worker is entering. Yeah. So, and at a time when we need more housing than ever. So that's really the big problem that we're trying to address is how do we maximize the value of the existing labor force while at the same time bringing new technology into the industry in a way that's going to attract a new generation of workers. Because we've people who used to go into construction are now going into programming or joining the gig economy. And we want to give them an opportunity to work with the latest and greatest and cutting edge technology and do so in a safer work environment. And because it's prefab, we're also able to have set hours and shifts. So it's not a situation where, it's raining today, I'm not going to get paid. When you're working, even if it's rain, snow, it doesn't matter. Still going to be able to get that paycheck and take care of your family. So that for us, it's about how do we work with the different trades? How do we work with the different regulators to really make sure that we're providing good quality jobs that help move the industry forward and help address the fact that we have to build all this housing and infrastructure, and we just simply don't have the people to do it.
Sure. Is this something where you guys are looking to partner up with different contractors as a means of expanding the business? How do you guys look at that?
Yeah, so obviously it doesn't make sense to ship across the country, across the world from California, given the construction costs here. So what our vision has always been to have a distributed network of what we call mighty factories. Because one of the really cool things about using the technology we are is that we can set up a factory in relatively small footprint. So in Oakland, we're in a 80,000 square foot old warehouse that used to be a Pete's Coffee warehouse.
Right.
Of that, 50,000 square feet is production floor. At our current stage, we can produce about 300 units a year, or about 360,000 square feet of production. Where we're going with that is we're actually working on upgrades to get it to 1,000 units a year, or over 1.2 million square feet of production out of that same 50,000 square feet. So as we expand, we're looking to identify partners, builders and developers and general contractors who we can work with in areas where there's demand. And so we can essentially serve as a tool for them. Because where we're going is a production as a service platform that's going to be product, market, and design agnostic and really allow us to provide whatever is needed for a particular project to allow productivity to be increased. And right now, with our current residential focus, we are in the process of building partnerships with general contractors in areas where we have customers and starting to move more into that B2B space to be able to work with developers and builders on both residential currently, but in the future, commercial projects. And so with those factories, we're ideally looking to set them up as joint ventures or otherwise set them up in partnership with those local legacy players to really take advantage of the fact that they're the experts in their local communities. And because so much of, as you know, so much of building is relationships, and it's about understanding the nuances of the local environment. And so for us, it doesn't make sense to have to come and learn all of that when there's these amazing companies, builders, developers, contractors who already understand that and already have these relationships. So for us, it makes sense to come in, serve as a tool for them, let them focus on the things they're really good at, like the land acquisition, the permitting, the entitlements process, all of that, and then have us help support the things that would often be subbed out by providing these prefabricated units that allow them to get more done faster.
That's interesting. So that idea of being product, market, and design agnostic, that then puts the sort of the onus upon you to really dial in the technology side of it then.
Exactly. And then that's what we're doing. So we're really along with what we've done on the material development and on the printer technology, we're doing a lot of work on the software side. And so one of the things we've already done is we have a Revit plugin for our panel system that makes it easy to create customizable floor plans. And the goal is to continue to develop that out to make it as easy as possible for architects and designers to work directly with our technology and design, and unlocking the versatility and the opportunities that provides. Because at the end of the day, the only way our technology makes sense is if it's easy for people to use.
What do you think is the biggest roadblock to your company's success? And I'm asking this question not just for your company, but in terms of the adoption of 3D printing as a viable option in construction on a larger scale.
Yeah, so one of the big areas is obviously adoption by the industry at scale. And so part of that is finding the smaller builders and developers who tend to be more open to new technology and working with them to get those first projects out, to demonstrate the viability of it. And once that happens, I think we'll see a lot more movement by the bigger players to start adopting 3D printing. But obviously, a big part of it is also the regulatory side of things. But
yes, that's
obviously a space that's really exciting right now, though, because we've seen in the last couple of years a lot of movement there. On the concrete side, there was originally in 2019 the AC 509, so acceptance criteria 509 from International Code Council Evaluation Services that was developed for 3D printing concrete. That was done in partnership with Contour Crafting, which is a 3D printing company out of Los Angeles. And that was just updated this year to account for multi-story buildings or at least two-story buildings with concrete as well. And that was, I believe, done in partnership with Black Buffalo, a 3D printing company out in New York. And then the work we're doing, we've been working really closely with UL. And the reason we chose UL as our evaluation partner instead of ICC is that not only does UL have over 100 years of building life safety experience, they also have some of the world's leading experts in additive manufacturing, which means they're uniquely situated to understand the technology. And then because ours is so unique, we're not using something that's been used for construction for millennia like concrete has. And so it took some company that has a higher level of understanding of some of the nature of that new technology. But what's really cool that came out of that is they created the world's first standard for 3D printed construction, UL 3401. That has since served as the basis for Appendix AW in the 2021 International Residential Code update. And has been proposed as an adoptable appendix as well for the International Building Code. So we're really excited about our work with UL and others to help bring 3D printing into the code itself. And additionally, we're also involved along with some of the other 3D printing companies, in the development of new standards for ASTM through their subsection working on the application of construction of additive manufacturing to construction, as well as some of the work that's going on between joint efforts between ISO and ASTM on the development of standards for 3D printing in construction. So in that regard, it's a really, really exciting time, but it takes time. And given that a lot of these technologies are still pretty nascent. I mean, we'll be 4 years old in August. Right. And so there's still a need to demonstrate over time the performance and not just the accelerated, because obviously we're doing accelerated aging tests. We're doing everything we can to demonstrate the durability and the performance. But there's always going to be people in the industry who are not going to want to adopt it till it's been there for 10, 20, 30 years. And that's just the reality. Thankfully, there's enough people in the industry who are recognizing the fact that we can't wait that long to start embracing these technologies. If we're going to solve the housing crisis, we're going to solve our infrastructure crisis.
So let me ask you this. You said that the smaller companies, construction companies, are more open to new technologies. But then I think the bigger companies actually have some money to put aside to getting into this stuff. Mm-hmm. That's not been your experience then, huh?
Well, so we've had great conversations with a lot of the big builders, and the innovation teams love us and are very excited for what we're doing. Where it comes down to is then you get to the production side, which tends to be more conservative. And so essentially what's been communicated to us is that basically show you can do this at scale and we're on board. But at the same time, then you also do see companies like Lennar and others investing in other advanced prefabrication, like Vive and others, that are using existing technologies in new ways, but still is more iterative versus the revolutionary approach that the Mighty Buildings and others are taking in terms of bringing 3D printing and new materials into the space.
Right. Interesting. Where do you see 3D printing going in the next 5 to 10 years? If we were to have this conversation, let's say 10 years from now, what's happened in the industry and what do contractors need to look out for today that'll get them ready for that?
Yeah, so obviously I'm incredibly biased, and I'd be in the wrong job if I wasn't incredibly bullish as well on the technology. So I think in 10 years that there's a very good chance that 3D printing, if not completely mainstream, will be widely adopted. And that we'll see it being deployed not only in the residential, but also the commercial space and infrastructure. I mean, there's interesting applications where you can even use it in combination with existing technologies, like the creation of more cost-effective formwork. I mean, we're already seeing interest in 3D printed construction for renewable energy infrastructure, wind turbines and others. So I think in 10 years, we'll see it in a lot of different areas are currently using traditional construction. And I think that's going to be driven by the market because frankly, the need is there, the demand is there, and the industry to where we are now just can't keep up. And so I think 3D printing, more than maybe any other technology out there, has the ability to really address that fact in a way that unlocks the productivity of the existing labor force, attracts a new generation of workers, and really allows us to not only build more of the way using aesthetics that we currently have, but also opens up new opportunities and that to really change how we build for the better.
It's interesting because one of the aspects that we haven't really touched on yet is the aspect of the environmental impact of 3D printing. So can you speak to that a little bit in terms of the technology that you're using specifically?
Definitely. And at Mighty Buildings, it's core to our mission that not only do we address the housing crisis, but we do so in a way that mitigates the impacts on the climate crisis. Because the reality is, the construction phase of buildings generates about 11% of all global emissions. Building energy use phase generates another 28% of global emissions. And those don't account for the waste generated during construction or the global warming impacts of the materials at end of life when they go to landfill or wherever they end up. And so one of the really exciting things about 3D printing is that it's additive. So you're not starting with something and then cutting out what you don't need. You're able to actually build using exactly what's needed, which means that for us at Mighty Buildings, we're able to eliminate over 95% of the waste that you would have with the traditional build. So that's over 3 to 5 pounds per square foot. So here in California, where we have pretty stringent recycling requirements around landfill diversion, we're still able to save about a ton of carbon per 1,000 square foot unit. Outside of California, that jumps to about 3 tons of carbon per unit. And additionally, we're able to create units that are incredibly energy efficient, which means that we make it pretty easy to achieve things like passive house standards or achieve a zero net energy building through the incorporation of solar and battery backup. And because we're able to reduce costs against comparable quality by as much as 20 to 40%, that also means that we can make it cost effective to deploy solar or other on-site renewables and battery to create that zero net energy opportunity. So those are the two areas that I see for us right now that are really big. And there's amazing opportunities moving forward because one of the things that we're working on actively is achieving a 2028 carbon neutrality goal. So we're actually staking a claim to being 22 years ahead of the broader industry because frankly, 2050 is too long. I mean, what we're already seeing in terms of fires and the impacts of the worsening hurricanes, because those also have direct impacts on the housing stock. So it's kind of this two-way street where how the building more housing can make the climate change worse, and climate change getting worse reduces how much housing we have. And it also obviously direct impacts on commercial infrastructure as well. So I think there's real opportunity with new material development and with new ways of building to really optimize how we're doing it in a way that allows us to build everything we need without that creating a world that's not livable anymore.
Does that pitch resonate with the companies that you're looking to partner with, or is that just a sort of a bonus to them? How do you look at that?
So it depends on the company. And that's one of the areas where you tend to have your smaller kind of companies that are run by younger people who tend to care more about that. Does become very, very important. And when you're talking with people on the government side, that's something they're really starting to look at more and more. But I think on the broader industry, it's something that people are thinking about, but I fully expect it's going to become a big part of things because we've even had the American Petroleum Institute embrace the idea of a carbon tax. Right. So it would not surprise me if we end up with a regulatory structure that incentivizes lower carbon construction and lower carbon opportunities. And I think that's somewhere where this kind of technology and these opportunities are really going to take off in that way. But at the end of the day, it's really about balancing the needs of people, planet, and profit. Because you can be the greenest, most socially conscious company in the world, but if you don't have a viable business model, you're not going to have any impact because you're not going to exist. So it's also about the bottom line and being able to deliver savings, both in terms of time, but as well as cost, and then also while maintaining a high level of quality. Because that's something that comes through in all our conversations with builders and developers. It doesn't matter whether they're big or small, but it's time, cost, quality. And if you can win two out of those three, you're good. If you can win on all three, you're doing amazing. So that's really our focus. The sustainability part is really important and just core to who we are and how we do it. And as I said, I think it's going to become more and more important as it does start to add cost to projects, as we see things like carbon taxes and other implications come in, like we've seen in the automotive space.
I think it's interesting because another element that falls into this that I always think about with 3D printing is the idea of safety as well.
Yeah.
If there's less time on the job site because you're bringing in these modular units, then that increases the likelihood of achieving safety goals as well.
Correct. And then also taking, as we discussed, taking some of the most difficult and dangerous parts of the build and really giving them to the printer and the robots and really freeing the humans up to do the part that really makes sense for humans to do.
Yep. No, that's excellent. So again, this is a technology that's been around for a while. It's been hyped and hasn't quite lived up to the hype yet. You guys are coming in with a new take on the technology in terms of the Lightstone material. What are some, if I'm a general contractor or even a subcontractor, I know this technology's out there. I want to begin to get my feet and dabble a little bit. What are some next steps that I might be able to take to educate myself?
Yeah, well, we would love it if you reach out to us at Mighty Buildings. You can actually check out our website, mightybuildings.com. You can find out more about us there. And then also, if you're just more interested in the industry, people can reach out to me at sam@mightybuildings.com, and happy to point them into the direction of some resources. There's some wonderful efforts going on that are broader than just 3D printing, but that are definitely still tied to it, such as the new Advanced Building Construction Collaborative that's been launched by the Department of Energy and the Rocky Mountain Institute. The Housing Innovation Alliance has some great resources on some of the cutting edge stuff that's happening.
Say that again, Advanced Building?
So it's called the ABC Collaborative, Advanced Building Construction Collaborative.
Okay. I'll put a link in the show notes to that as well.
Yeah, and then the other one is the Housing Innovation Alliance.
Housing Innovation Alliance.
Obviously, less focused on the commercial space, but still they're doing leading efforts to identify new technologies such as 3D printing that are out there. And then there's going to be announced, I believe, there's something being announced next week that I don't believe I'm allowed to talk about yet, but which will serve as an additional resource for people interested in learning about 3D printed construction. So after next week, maybe you'll have to have me back on and we can talk about that too.
That'd be beautiful. That's awesome. Well, Sam, I really appreciate your time. This is a good little intro for us. I do want to keep in touch though, because as this thing develops, we want to make sure that we're giving appropriate visibility to these new technologies, which are having a tremendous impact. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, Sam.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Really appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, very much looking forward to staying in touch and hoping to have a chance to speak again and give you some great updates in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Today's episode was brought to you by the Construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.